Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, a program where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. We discuss these issues in order to contextualize them and see how they affect our economy. There can be issues to do with mining, tourism, agriculture, and even politics. That includes elections, as the 2023 elections of the 23rd and the 24th of August have come and gone, and the president has been inaugurated in his second term. My name is John Masuku. In his inauguration speech, the president, His Excellency Comrade Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, touched on a number of economic issues that he's going to pursue with his government after being re-elected. And these are the issues that we would like to discuss, and others that we are going to come up with my guest here, Christopher Mugaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Chris.
Pleasure, man. Thank you for
Yes.
me.
Just before the elections, there were quite a number of, I may call them excuses, where people say, we're waiting for the elections. If you say, but where is this paper? People will just give a reason that we're waiting for the elections. But the elections have come and gone. Are there still those excuses, and how are we forging forward?
Thank you so much. Well, coming from business, obviously, we certainly can't have a tune of excuses as you are hinting on. We know for sure that the political cycle every 5 years, there's a plebiscite which tends to happen, and in Zimbabwe, according to the constitutional provision, definitely we've what we call the general elections, which encompass the presidential, the council, and also the parliamentary. So business, if you were to ask, we will tell you that the sentiment is quite very strong and positive. We are just good to go. Yes, challenges here and there, especially headwinds from the economic side, are always being faced, which definitely I think I was speaking to the exchange rate volatility. You look at the weather-related risks, which we call the external shocks we can't control over, and then other attendant challenges, definitely I think we can find timing. But the wait and see attitude, I don't.
That's not your route.
It's anything which is maybe transpiring at the moment. It's not.
Yes. Now, but while we're still on the elections, there were also some reports from different observer missions. Some of them were also adverse. How do those reports affect perceptions, going forward? Zimbabwe has to engage and re-engage, and also in the context of some of the reports that came. Obviously, as commerce and industry, you're positive. You have to dispel some of the negative perceptions.
I think it depends on where you stand. One is a nation, two is the players within the nation. Firstly, whenever there is a plebiscite, an election, a report has to come. The reason why reports come, it can be adverse, it can be favorable. But what's more necessary and what's more important is how do you drive the agenda of the nation going forward. You look at the Capitol Hill, I think the whole violence which was witnessed following the loss or the defeat of Mr. Trump. You look at Brazil, we even had a case of demonstrators getting to the State House of Brazil. So to me, the issue should not necessarily be about the reports themselves. Zimbabwe is an opportunity to tell the world the colors, the nature, the agenda it has. If the whole nation will come to a standstill because of possibly or potentially an adverse report as they are pointing to, then we don't know our agenda as a nation. Coming from private sector, the constituents I understand fully well. I tell you that we are not really investing much in that. But Zimbabwe government, I want to believe, they are also learning from some of the adverse aspects coming from the report. It's an election, it's a learning process. You will not go to any country possibly and see a perfect election being delivered. What makes it a democratic election is that capacity and appetite to continue addressing especially the shortfalls. It is a process, I believe.
Yes. Well, that's a positive outlook that you're giving there, Chris. So give us your forecast. The elections have come and gone. The president did allude to a number of issues relating to our economy. How do you ride on those, as commerce and industry?
Yeah, as industry, I think what's more significant for us is to acknowledge the challenges we are facing. One of the issues we continue clamoring for a resolution to regards the current conundrum which Zimbabwe is currently immersed in. If you look at the moment, I think it's a multi-current regime which had been backed or came about through delegated pieces of legislation, in particular Statute 118A of 2021. So our worry as business obviously is to what extent and how are we going to deal with achieving a monocurrency? Because for the past 5 years, you will see Zimbabwe's major downfall economic-wise had been having conflicting messages, especially on the currency front. That's one issue. Secondly, one thing you can't overlook, which is quite a very anathema to progress of the nation, is corruption and smuggling of goods. If that is to be arrested, obviously, we'll see gains on the economic front, can I say. Once corruption remains rife, once smuggling of goods remains pronounced, what it means is those are all leakages. And for us to talk of then achieving Vision 2030 without addressing that will become quite more of a pie in the sky. We need to work on addressing that. Then the
Well, while we've mentioned those two, the currency and corruption, let's look at how you, as the corporate world, have been trying to address these and what impediments you have faced. Why do we still have them? The currency, the president did reiterate that we will fight just to maintain our Zim dollar so that we continue with it. But let's hear from commerce and industry. It may have been one of your resolutions during your Congress for this year. Tell us.
Yeah, indeed, it is a resolution. But besides being a resolution also, I think we have agreed from the turn of 2013 post-GNU when the multi-currency regime seemed to somehow taking a stuttering, can I say, pace, where we're losing the multi-currency or losing the dollarization stand, if I'm to be precise. We know for sure that the current challenge we are facing, it makes planning difficult. The current challenge we are facing, it makes competitiveness issues quite a serious cancer which we are not addressing overnight. But coming from private sector, our resolutions have always been quite very loud and clear, pushing for what we call a market-determined exchange rate, which will not be controlled by anyone or by any force. And secondly, making sure that the whole auction system we have agreed, I think, even with the central government, that the auction, it needs somehow a revision or a revamp. We are not dismissing the existence or the spirit behind the auction, but what's more important is how do we fine-tune that unmarked auction so that it sends a signal to the market where if someone walks into the street, to walk into a bank, you should be able to exchange your money at a bureau de change without resorting to the streets. If that is solved, I tell you, then we can say we're working on the same path.
Just to conclude this segment, you had also mentioned corruption, the cancer of corruption in Zimbabwe. How are you addressing it? Because it's always talked about. And at times, others would allege that even well-to-do people in authority are involved in one or another. So you as industry or the corporate world, how are you addressing that?
No, we don't start addressing it at industry level. It's a personal governance at your household level. To what extent do you believe you can make it without being corrupt? From there, then we can move to even industry, then national. But our relationship with the anti-corruption body in Zimbabwe, where we already have an existing formal relationship, we believe it's a step in the right direction. But we need to see to it that prosecution happens. We don't want cases of corruption just to be speaking to without necessarily taking action, especially in the courts of law. If that is achieved, I tell you that will be a step forward in dealing with corruption.
Chris Mgaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, is our guest today, where we are making a focus of our economy after the elections, especially after the inauguration into office of the president going into his second term and also pronouncing some of his plans about the future of the economy. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We're now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today our guest is Christopher Mgaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, and is helping us to forecast the economy of Zimbabwe post-2023 elections. He has just discussed what the corporate world thinks can be done in the area of working together with government in order to improve our currency and we maintain our Zim dollar, because we can never shine without our own currency. and then also talking about corruption, how it can also be nipped in the bud so that it doesn't continue to affect our economy. What other issues would you want to bring into your forecast? I know NDS 1 has been some of the issues being ridden by the government. Is it going to remain as NDS 1, or are we now going into NDS 2?
Yeah, well, as we move into the second term of the just installed president, one of the issues which we can't overlook is the alignment of different pieces of legislation, obviously, to the 2013 Constitution. Yes, if you look, some of the issues we are looking at is alignment of pieces of legislation to the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which was obviously enacted in 2013. So with the new MPs who have been sworn in, what's more significant at this juncture now is to make sure that they work around the clock to see that all pieces of legislation are aligned to the Constitution of the country. And one of the issues which for some time has been quite a hanging matter is the Mines and Minerals Act. I think you know very well that one of the major forex earners in the country, which is also a big employer, remains the mining. You look at either from the big conventional mines or the artisanal mines. Zimbabwe needs to bring to finality the issue of the Mines and Minerals Act so that there is no uncertainty regarding that. In this private sector, we are quite involved in making sure that this act comes to fruition if possible.
Maybe, Chris, you can elaborate how that delay is affecting the economy.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at a piece of legislation, any investor who comes to a country when there's a piece of legislation which is not yet to be amended, or rather, which is yet to be ascended by the president, like we have with the Mines and Minerals Act, it then means all miners who are coming, they don't know who owns the land they are mining. Is it the government, or is the one who owns the claims? What does it mean if I'm to sell my minerals today in terms of the proceeds? Or that. So generally when we are looking at the act, is that piece of legislation which guides or defines mining as an industry. And once those tenets of the piece of legislation are not clear, it then builds a catatonic level of uncertainty, which then makes planning a difficult exercise by all stretch of imagination.
You just gave the Mining Act as an example. Any other acts that you would like to push as a matter of urgency?
I think there are different pieces of legislation, not necessarily looking at it from only acts, but for some time, I think as private sector, we've been clamoring for somehow less use of delegated pieces of legislation. In particular, you understand that we had more than 200 statutory instruments over just one calendar year. And some of those statutory instruments, they also have a bias or impacts on business planning. So if there can be a culture of trying to limit or reduce the use of statutory instruments as one of the pieces of instruments for lawmaking, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Then also, I think if you look at the issue of FDI, I think it's a fact that Zimbabwe for years has been depending on FDI. And after the enactment of ZIDA Act, which brought to life the ZIDA body, which I think you are aware of, we are looking at it to see how do we continue pushing for pro-investment policies, especially in special economic zones, which will push investors to come without any level of not knowing how we are going to react as a country. There's the issue of common agriculture industrial park between Zimbabwe and Zambia, which will be coming soon. And I think it has been on the agenda for some time. And coming from private sector, we are looking at the implementation of that particular piece of, can I say, law, where Zimbabwe and Zambia will own a common agro-industrial park. Most people may not be aware of what we are trying to achieve that. But we are saying, looking at the history of the two countries and the nature of our industry, surely we can achieve it or deepen the whole regional integration by allowing for such kind, which is common agriculture industrial park, to come to life.
Any other takeaways from the speech of His Excellency during the inauguration?
Yes. His Excellency spoke into a number of issues. Firstly, he spoke into currency, which I covered quite a lot. I think the government position from his speech is the push for a monocurrency without conflicting messages regarding currencies, where you have 3-4 different currencies operating in a country. That is an issue. Then also, it was quite deliberate that I spoke into mines also, because the president spoke into the finite resource of minerals and how smuggling of minerals is somehow costing this economy. According to the Chamber of Commerce numbers, we're actually looking at it, maybe numbers of around 2 to 2.5 billion we are losing yearly through somehow smuggling or illicit trading of those minerals. And if we can plug that hole, I think it will improve also the fiscal position of the nation. So you'll see, as Chamber of Commerce just 3 months ago, we came up with a number of resolutions also to make sure that confidence, which someone is in deficit in the investment world, in Zimbabwe in particular, can be rebuilt. And we are pushing for a number of reforms. The current one, we continue talking about it because it's a real cancer to this economy. Then we are in a body called African Continental Free Trade Area, where all countries in Africa are pushing to say, how can we have a borderless society? One large body, almost as good as a country. So Zimbabwe, we seem to be lagging behind in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area protocol or agreement we already have. And as private sector, we need to push that agenda working with our government to make sure that we are going to win that. Then another aspect which we continue emphasizing is private sector is the issue of embracing market forces. We had agreed, I think, with corporate tombstones, we've seen a lot of challenges with controlled economies. So exchange rate determination, employment creation, any policies we come up with, what's more significant is to make sure that we embrace market forces ahead of any other hand when you're making policies.
That's Christopher Mgaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, who is helping us today to forecast our economy going forward after the inauguration of His Excellency the President, and also the speech that he gave touching on various aspects of the economy and some of the projects that he started in his first term that he's going to continue with in his second term. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We're now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are focusing our economy after the 2023 elections of the 23rd and the 24th of August with Christopher Mgaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Chris, you've touched on a number of issues, but in the final segment, let's look at the outlook and how, as Zimbabwe, we're going to be meeting the targets that we're setting for ourselves.
Yes. In the outlook, I think we look at the variables such as employment creation, the gross domestic product, the exchange rate movement itself, the issue of interest rates, and above all, the issue of the trade account. What is the relationship we might have regarding our imports and exports? But looking at the gross domestic product, I think looking at the latest figures coming from the ZimStats and also Treasury, when you analyze the use of the currency we continue bemoaning is somehow distorted our ability to get a bigger picture or a much clearer picture of the size of this economy. Because once you are using a local currency, then trying to convert to US dollar with different exchange rates, which are debatable or somehow under contest, you may not get a better picture. So looking at such figures, in particular the GDP figures recently, there is a misleading rather picture coming out for the sake that you see using Zim dollars and then trying to convert to US dollars, you've seen the economy appear like it's not growing. But I'm quite convinced that the economy, somehow to a certain extent, has grown quite well and significantly in the past 5 years, rather than what is shown in the GDP figures. So we believe that after rebasing our GDP and also having stability in on the current front, we might have a GDP figure which is not under any level of contest. That's one issue. Then secondly, the current account, we are looking at the relationship of exports and imports. I think what we need to work on and work on much more is to make sure we close the gap between the imports and exports. Because if you are to have our own currencies we are clamoring for, one of the preconditions for our own currency is to have what we call a current account surplus. The moment you are buying more goods from outside the country than you are selling, it will put pressure on your currency, which will also make it difficult for you to build reserves, which we call the capital account. So Zimbabwe's focus right now should be on us making sure that we export more than we're importing. But those numbers also for us to trust them going into year end, into the future, is to try to make sure that smuggling and other balances we can't account for are somehow nipped in the bud. because you can have a figure of 4 billion in terms of export receipts formally. While real exports are 6 billion, you can't account for 2 billion because they are going through the borders unofficially. So we need that. Then the issue of employment creation, I think we've seen different figures in terms of those who are formally employed and informally employed. When you talk of unemployment, it can be a stricter definition of unemployment or a broader definition. What separates these definitions, obviously, is to what extent is someone who is not employed willing to continue being active in the market looking for that job. If someone is not employed and you sit at home and say, I've surrendered looking for a job, it's hard for you to be picked in those numbers of unemployment. So we need to see to it that we understand the levels of informality in the economy. This will also guide us in the nature of unemployment. Last but not least, the inflation front. I think for some time we always had challenges looking at what we call blended inflation, where you try to mix the US dollar and the Zim dollar. I think our position as private sector is clear that when we are reporting inflation, let inflation be separated. Well, if you're looking at ZWL, let it be. Any figures which are not looking like that, they will also be somehow distorted and misleading, especially for planning. Those are some of the issues we are looking at.
How about those projects which we left unfinished as a country in the last parliament and in the last term of office of His Excellency the President?
Yeah, if you look at the infrastructure spending in the country, infrastructure spending, even as a percent of GDP, the numbers are quite impressive. Only a few days ago, one of the major TV channels in South Africa had a very positive report on Zimbabwe's plot to modernize its borders. So its message, its signals which are also going to the world, that we made tremendous progress regarding modernization of our borders. Look at the Bay Bridge. I think with other borders coming also, the airport, to a certain extent, the new airport, you can also see it as a border, because you can look at land border and air border. Right. And such projects, I think they have to continue. Our only focus should just to balance the funding of our projects and making sure that it's sustainable to the extent that it will not create broad demand supply or much money in the economy, which will be inflationary. But those projects, we need them. And the fact that the quality of investment is biased domestically, when most of the contractors in these projects are Zimbabweans, that should also send a signal that is inward investment, which is positive when we interpret the quality of that type of investment we are talking about.
That's Christopher Mukaga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. We thank you very much for coming on to Economic Forum. He has been outlining what the economy would look like or should look like, after the inauguration of His Excellency the President, Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa, at the end of the elections of the 23rd and 24th of August 2023. So what remains is to thank him for coming to the program. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you'd like to engage with us on various issues, including the economy, the outlook and the forecast and so forth, you can do so on the social media platforms that again are showing on the screen. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can view them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Christopher Mukaga of ZNCC and the production crew, this is John Masubu wishing you happy viewing.